Listen, I want to begin with the consultation, or at least the frustration Premier seems to be expressing here in Halifax about the lack of consultation from Ottawa on areas that are provincial jurisdiction. Just how strongly do you feel about that issue? Just how strong is your frustration right now with Ottawa?
Well, the word consultation doesn't really capture the frustration. I mean, the issue, I think generally around the table, but I'll just speak for myself, is that we have provincial programs. In some cases, they're working really well, and some they need assistance. But when the federal government layers on another program on top that requires either a separate application process or participants have to go through a different set of hoops. So, for example, the housing infrastructure funding. We have communities where we're focusing on building more housing. They're target communities. We need that to be lined up with the infrastructure money, to be lined up with our financing and all the other programs. It makes it really challenging when these programs come in and the feds are working directly with the cities and the province isn't involved. So it's about overlap, it's about duplication, it's about not getting the full bang for the taxpayer dollar. There's only one taxpayer, and they want the program to be as effective as possible, so do we. And so why is it that it doesn't seem like we can really coordinate these things the way that we should?
Except you have shared the stage with the Prime Minister on a number of announcements this past year on housing, for example. You've negotiated health with the Prime Minister. When you talk to him about these concerns, about overstepping, and the letter from the Premier has called it unilateral decisions on provincial jurisdiction, what's his response to that? Is he convinced of your argument?
Well, I think we have different understandings of how the health negotiations went. It was presented to the provinces, and that's fine if that's the approach of the federal government. But what's not fine is that this table of all of the premiers has been calling for a meeting with the Prime Minister on an array of issues. Since I came into being the Premier, it's been a couple of years now, and we haven't had that meeting. And so whether it's coordination around healthcare, this isn't even about money. Just like coordinating training across Canada for healthcare professionals, making sure that we're not overlapping training, that we're all working together, coordinating the credentialing of healthcare professionals across Canada so healthcare professionals can move right across Canada without difficulty. These are key roles for the federal government that if we're all sitting down at the table working on those priorities, setting those priorities, the federal government is playing a perfect role around coordination. The issue of immigration, asylum seekers, the distribution of them across Canada, making sure that every province is supporting refugee claimants. I mean, these are key roles for the federal government to be arrived at around a table. And so we can do press conferences. We do receive federal funding. We're always grateful for it. But the hard work of sitting around a table, hammering out priorities, working together, I think that's what makes this Canada. And it's something that's been missing. And I just can't figure out why. It doesn't make sense to me.
Can't figure out why. So I was going to ask that, whether or not you allow yourself just to speculate as to why the Prime Minister has not convened a First Minister's meeting when he has met individually with premiers.
I think there's a huge opportunity. There's a chance for a reset for the Prime Minister to call everybody together, and it could be on any one of a variety of topics, on infrastructure, on trade, on healthcare coordination, on immigration, but just to start that conversation, because the frustrations have built up, and now I'll speak for myself. The frustration is at a very high level that there are key priorities provincially that we're communicating to the federal government, and we're just not seeing that reaction that we would hope.
Another matter I want to talk to you about has to do with equalization, and I know British Columbia is eyeing that issue very closely right now. Not alone, though. Newfoundland, Labrador, of course, launching a constitutional challenge on it. Alberta thinking about doing an intervenor status. Saskatchewan speaking about it. Is equalization broken?
Equalization is one of those topics where people's eyes can glaze over, and it's always been a grievance of Western provinces and Eastern provinces are working hard to not be as reliant on equalization. Here's my understanding of things. The whole program is designed to ensure that every Canadian has access to a good quality school, to health care, to basic services. What the program has become, though, is one where British Columbia taxpayers pay into a central pot that's then distributed to, of all places, Ontario. I cannot fathom why BC taxpayers are sending, in the last 2 years, contributing to sending $1 billion to the province of Ontario. Ontario's not struggling to deliver schools. They're not struggling to deliver health care. They're making decisions about their tax base, about how they spend their money. I saw a whole bunch of announcements about buying out a beer store contract. They're doing just fine. but BC taxpayers are struggling with affordability. And so when I look at BC taxpayers supporting Ontarians for some reason, when they're having no difficulty delivering those programs, it strikes me that the program is broken, that it's not working the way it's intended, that it's no longer about services, it's about something else entirely. And it was the federal government's decision to put it in the Constitution. Newfoundland has brought a challenge. They've invited us to be a part of it. We're having a look at it. I'm advancing those conversations with Premier Furey actually during these meetings, and we hope to have something to say about that, potentially even during these meetings, because they have raised an important issue, and we've got a different perspective than Newfoundland, but they've raised an important issue, and we're looking at how we can support them.
Is that potentially divisive, though, for the country?
Well, I think what's divisive is letting this program get away from its original intent, which was ensuring that Canadians, no matter where you are in the country, get a certain minimum level of service. When we start getting away from that, and it's about something else entirely, but for BC, when it's coupled up with the fact not only are we sending equalization dollars to Ontario, but then we have to watch Ontario get a $1.3 billion hospital in the last couple of weeks when we don't have access to hospital capital funding in the same way. We watch Ontario get 2 battery plants at a cost of billions of dollars of federal tax dollars when we don't get that kind of support for industries in British Columbia from the federal government. So not only is there equalization, there's this other special tranche of programs that only seem to be available to Quebec and Ontario, and it's just really hard to stomach. And so I think that is what's corrosive to Canadian unity, is that there's not a per capita distribution that's fair across the country, supporting all the provinces in the same way, not picking winners and losers, and just saying, here's our program, we're sharing it among the provinces fairly, and let's move on from there.
You know, before we're done, I also want to get some comment. Of course, this past weekend we saw the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. What does that say to you, I guess first and foremost, about the political climate that we live in right now and the kind of discussions as to how Canadians discuss politics?
Well, I find that kind of political violence profoundly worrying, especially in our giant neighbor to the south. I mean, for Canadians, we do need a stable United States. We need a partner on a bunch of different issues, and that's critical to us. And of course, political violence, regardless of where it is, whether it's the United States or in Canada, I think the vast majority of people are just profoundly opposed to that, myself included. One of the things that we've seen in BC particularly is an escalation in threats towards politicians, but particularly women. For whatever reason, female politicians tend to be attracting this kind of threat, this kind of vitriol, and it's brought actually different parties together in British Columbia about how to work on this issue through the Speaker's office. So it's not just in the United States, it's not just in Ottawa, it is at the provincial level as well. And one of the downsides, major downsides of this kind of climate is that we lose really good people who would otherwise be interested in politics but don't want to put themselves or their families through that kind of stress. And so it's critically important we address that evolution or devolution of our political culture to the lowest common denominator, to threats, to demonization, and so on. And I hope that we're able to do that. I hope this is a wake-up call for all of us.
You will be campaigning in the fall. There will be an election in British Columbia. Do you worry about security and safety for you, for the people that will be running for your party, and for all others?
It's a privilege to serve in the job of Premier. It's a remarkable opportunity. I got a great security team that supports me, supports my family. I'm very grateful for that. My anxiety is around groups that are maybe underrepresented in our politics that seem to face more racism, sexism, misogyny, women in politics, racialized women in politics, who won't even be able to participate. And so that's where my anxiety is about this. And I'm very hopeful that this discussion that we're having now, that's been facilitated by a terrible event in the United States, enables us in Canada to remind ourselves what we like about Canada. The political violence has not been part of our culture, and it doesn't need to be part of our culture, and we can resolve these issues without it.
Premier Eby, thank you.
Thanks very much.